Yeah, welcome to this video. This is a new episode of Your Games Reviewed. Yeah, the viewer games are back. Yeah, they never really were gone. It's just that it takes a lot of time to do this kind of video, and I didn't have it recently. But yeah, here we go. I'm actually going to do two games in that video here. So one viewer sent me two of his games, and he said, I'll choose one. Take one of the two, but ultimately I decided to show both. I'm going to be a bit more thorough with the first one, or go into more detail with the first game. But the second game had so many interesting lines that I thought, it should be shown. Okay, to get more information about this game, our viewer here is Black. I have kept the names secret. He's a 1600 player and his opponent is rated 1850. So he's a pretty clear underdog in that game here with Black. Let's see what happened. We have d4 e6, c4,
check,
and this check here. Yeah, that line is sometimes called the Keres defense. It's a relatively rare response to 1d4, but not because it is bad. I think it's actually a pretty good opening. This check on the second move. I have played this a bit myself over the years. I think the only reason why it is not seen more frequently on the Grandmaster level is the simple reason that people have to be ready for the French defense, and not every player is ready for that. So that's the drawback of 1e6. Obviously, if you don't play the French, you're kind of gambling. But
check.
This opening in itself is quite good for Black. I mean, not an advantage, but it's a very reasonable choice. Knight c3 played here by the opponent. Normal looking move, mostly played by people who allow the Nimzo, which we could transpose to if Black now plays knight f6. However, this doesn't really try to make anything out of this particular move order, and Black can try to do that. He has two moves to give this position now some distinct flavor. King goes c5 or b6. Our viewer here went c5. b6 is also an interesting move, leading to, after this, for example, two lines of the English defense with e6, b6. But c5 is good. Also a move that, by the way, I have played in tournament chess. The white player now goes for the move a3, which is hinting that he might have played the same-ish variation against the pure Nimzo. a3. The Samish versus the Nimzo is a line that I have played quite a bit here in Blitz chess, but it's a line that is fairly risky against the pure Nimzo, and I think actually against the move order shown here, it is a little bit more than risky. Maybe it's a little bit shaky, I think, for white to play like that, and we will see in the game why I think this is not the most promising line. What should white do against c5? The most popular choices are knight to f3, to be ready to recapture with the knight, or e3, and this is actually what I would recommend. One of those two. If you allow this in the first place, actually I believe that white's best moves here after the check are knight d2 and bishop d2. I think knight c3 is simply not the best move. But it's a different story, of course, all of those lines. Let's see a3, and to understand why I think this isn't that great, we need to draw a comparison, or we need to see the comparison to the pure Samish main line. Let's do that. In the pure Samish, this is played. Takes c5, and now white is building up his center. Let's look at this, e4, and in this particular moment, this is the absolute main line of this line of the Nimzo. At this moment, Black is faced with a threat, and this threat is bishop g5, the pin move here. If Black is ignoring this and just plays any move, let's say something like this, this is going to be a problem. The threat is e5, winning a piece, and Black really has a hard time to get rid of that pin. Yeah, there is no bishop anymore to break the pin. It has been traded on c3. So black is in trouble here. Yeah, he has to play some really awkward stuff to get rid of the pin. So black is playing against this idea of the pin and goes knight e8. This is an absolute key move in the Sämisch variation. One additional point of the move, besides just avoiding the pin, is that after, let's say, this is just to show the idea, after white is expanding here with his monster center, black has the move f5. That's a very important resource. If black is not going for f5 himself, white will push f5. For example, after a move like knight a5, white can go here. It has the idea to even push f6. Yeah, after knight f6, again there's a pin. White has some attacking ideas here that are really dangerous, but f5 is the move that tries to fix here on light squares and keeps this bishop bad. Yeah, the c1 bishop is looking at the f4 pawn, the d3 bishop is looking at the c4 pawn. That is why this is a strategically risky opening for white. We need to keep that in mind. Black has played knight to f6, he has played knight to e8 back, and then he has played f5. Keep that in mind. Let's go back to the game. c5, a3, check. takes. Yeah, now b6 was played. Yeah, I got this game with some short annotations by the player, by our viewer, and I'm going to use these annotations a little bit to tell you what he thought, and we compare that with my thinking process. I think this is an interesting thing and also a reason why I chose that game. He disliked b6, yeah, in his annotation, and said he should have played just knight f6 to make sure that e4 is not happening. Knight f6 is not a bad move. It just transposes to the line that we just looked at before. This is the pure Sämisch now, out of the Nimzo. Not bad at all, but I don't think that b6 is any particular problem. White can play e4, but this is not something to be particularly afraid of. It seems that he felt that white had a chance here with e4 to get an advantage. I don't think that this is really the case. White in the game played the move e3, which, yeah, well, it's not necessary at all. He can play e4 and he should do that, but I don't think that black has a huge problem here. Yeah, after e4, he will probably play in the same vein as in the game, like let's say like this: knight e7, bishop here, knight c6, and now I don't know, knight f3 or knight e2. It's both viable. Let's say this, and something like bishop a6 now, or d6. We will see something very comparable in the game, but white is a tempo down in the game because he played e3 and then e4. e3, and now knight e7 was played. And he says, yeah, he starts to go wrong here. He wanted to play f5 and knight f6. This is not really wrong, knight e7. Putting the knight on e7 is one of the benefits of this move order, actually. Yeah, the idea to delay the knight development can be very useful, and now knight e7 does make perfect sense. The reason is that you very often want to have the f5 push, as we had seen in the Sämisch mainline, to stop the white center. And it's simply a different kind of setup here, but it's the same idea. In the Nimzo, you have knight to f6, you jump back to e8, and then you push f5, and here you play just knight e7 in one go, and then f5. So it's a totally comparable idea, but this is actually a little bit more, yeah, it's a very smooth way to set up your pieces. Black is perfectly okay after knight e7. There's nothing wrong with it at all. Of course, knight f6 would transpose to the Nimzo, but knight e7 is a good way to play. And I think that really white has some issues here. He now tries to play in typical Sämisch style, bishop d3 and knight e2. And I'm not really sure if this is a great idea. It's maybe already a case can be made for trying to play it like this, knight f3 to d2, to have more protection of c4. It's not what you want. It's not a dream scenario for white, but we will see that in the game white is getting into huge trouble quite quickly. Knight e2, knight c6, all very nice. e4, and now he went knight to a5. Yeah, that's all very logical and exactly how it should be played. Yeah, the knight comes to a5 and attacks the weak c4 pawn. The c4 pawn is the problem pawn, of course, of this opening. It is very often lost simply because white has a hard time to defend it against this combined attack of knight to a5 and bishop on a6. However, white quite often gets some dynamic compensation for the pawn. This is not happening in the game, however. So I think this is really a clearly inferior version of the Semish variation, especially considering that white here has lost this tempo with first e3 and then e4. He went e3 first and then only then pushed e4. He went bishop e3 now. White player did. And our viewer played the move d6. Yeah, d6 is perfectly fine, of course. He was worried that maybe white will take the pawn on c5. An idea to remember, however, is that black is not really obliged to cover that pawn in all cases. Here also bishop a6 came into consideration, which basically trades the c5 pawn for the c4 pawn. Yeah, after the capture, knight c4, for example, is definitely a very decent position for black. Yeah, for example, if white takes it here, we have a very nice bishop there on c4, nicely placed. And after something like this, white's pawn structure here and the light squared weaknesses are really problematic. Black has a pretty good position here. His weaknesses are far less important or easy to attack. So bishop e3, bishop a6 was an alternative. d6 is however not bad. As our viewer played, he just supported his c5 pawn. Yeah, white now went f4. Yeah, f4. The kind of the typical way how the Semish variation is sometimes played, just push the whole center forward. However, I think it's a mistake, but okay, let's go to that later. I think white probably has to go with knight g3 to have queen e2 as an additional support of the c4 pawn. So after this, he can go queen e2. I mean, black is very comfortable in this position, but yeah, it's what white simply needs to do. There's not much else. Okay, he went f4, and now our viewer says, I've lost the center and never played f5. I'm instead obsessed with winning the double pawn, which may not be worth winning so early. Well, if you can win that pawn on c4 and you're not getting checkmated, you should simply take it, because it is the weakness, and if you can take it, well, go ahead. In this position, black went queen d7, but if he goes bishop a6 now, which is very logical, yeah, it is a logical continuation of black's play, I simply don't see how white keeps a playable position here. I think on some level white is busted here. Yeah, c4 gets lost. I don't see, he cannot keep it. It's just a lost pawn, and the problem is, quite often, if the pawn gets lost, your compensation that white might get has to be there quickly, really quickly. The issue is that c4 is not just a pawn getting lost, but also your light squares are terribly weakened. If you imagine a scenario, let's say white castles. I mean, he just loses the pawn. He has no way to keep it. So, castles. If he goes queen a4, trying to keep it, there's just queen e8, and that's it. Yeah, queens are traded. And then c4 drops next, and there's not even any kind of activity, yeah, simply. With queens off, this is basically winning for black. you win a pawn and you have structure. Yeah, let's have a look. Bishop a6 castles. This is probably the most likely move that white would play. But bishop c4 now. Yeah, and the thing that what I mentioned about the light squares is just one possible scenario. If you imagine white takes, which is not even good, but just this, look how strong this knight is on c4. Yeah, just a fantastic piece. It can be easily supported by d5 or b5, and it's just sitting in white's camp, and it's very, very annoying to face. In many cases, you can also support it with d5. Yeah, let's just say like queen d3 takes d5. Just yeah, something like that. Where knight f5. Oh, that's a wrong arrow. Where knight f5 might come. This kind of thing is just excellent for black. And there are maybe ways to improve, but I just want to show the general idea. It's just not a pawn going down on c4, but with it almost the whole position. If white keeps the bishop on, black has this idea, which shows how nicely placed this is actually. f5 is just a very strong move. If white takes, we recapture, and the knight is just very strong. And also note that d5 can be a possible stronghold for black's bishop or knight after regrouping. I like knight here, here, here. So very nice position. And well, this is a very stupid looking bishop. Yeah. So with bishop a6, black's position would have been really overwhelming. To me, it's a little bit mysterious why that move was not played, because it clearly belongs to black's agenda. He played queen d7, by the way, which is not really essential. The queen very often goes to d7 in this kind of position to have a little bit of additional support for the f5 move. So it's not a wrong move in terms of what belongs into the position in terms of patterns and things like that. But it's just not the best one. Bishop a6 wins the pawn on c4, and with it probably the game. And this is an opportunity that should be taken. If you can play bishop a6, you should do that and take the pawn. The thing is, it's clear that we want to attack c4 and possibly win it. And it's not so clear if we want the queen on d7 in all cases. So bishop has to go to a6 simply because there's never any other place that it's going to go. Bishop a6 just belongs into that position, and you definitely want to take the pawn. So queen d7 was played, and white player now went with castles. Yeah. Okay, by the way, queen d7 keeps a black advantage. It's just not as good as bishop a6. Bishop a6. Yeah, white castled. It's not clear if he has anything better, but now bishop a6 was played. And now knight g3. After knight g3, again, black has a fantastic position. I think white was very, I don't know, very laid back here about this thing. I think after knight g3 he's basically losing the game, but I think he should have tried something drastic to try to muddy the waters. I mean, f5 suggested itself just to get something going. I think this is what white really had to do, even though it's not objectively speaking really great for him. But knight g3 just gives up the game without a fight. Yeah, e takes f. I think black should take it. Takes. Yeah, and now an interesting moment. Black now has a choice. He can play f6, just stopping the f-pawn from going any further, which however weakens e6 a little bit. The move knight f4 could prove tricky. I mean, I don't think that white has enough here, but at least it's kind of murky. Yeah, the knight might come to e6 on a good day. Or black can play differently. He can also just take it and say, okay, I don't mind f6. Knight d5 is a good move. Takes rook e8. And again, this seems to be good for black, but it is reasonably here, this kind of thing. It seems good for black, but it's reasonably murky. At least it looks like a fight. In the game, black's advantage has decisive proportions, and white doesn't even have any counterplay. So he went knight g3, the white player did, and black now took the pawn. Of course, that is the whole purpose of knight a6, knight a5 and bishop a6. White now absolutely surprisingly took on c5. Again, I thought f5, trying to stir up some trouble. He took on c5. And now this next move, or the next sequence of moves, is quite mysterious. And it's also not something that our viewer here mentions in his annotations. He now took on d3 with the bishop. And this is mysterious because if we check what happens, first of all, queen takes, pawn takes c5, bishop c5, knight b3, a rather complicated line. We will see in the analysis later that this is complicated and not at all clear. However, if you are in this position and you are black, you have to look at, three candidate moves, if we think of candidate moves. Taking on d3, taking on c5 with the b pawn, taking on c5 with the d pawn. And we should check all three moves. Once we get to the point that we check d takes c5, we see that the d file is opened and it's a double attack by queen and bishop on d3. So there's pressure on this bishop and white has to react to that. This line gets forced. It's a forcing line now, because white now basically only has one move. The only move here to continue the game is bishop c2. If you take on c4, for example, after the queen trade and knight takes on c4, black's advantage is overwhelming and something like that. We have won a pawn. We have a fantastic piece on c4. This knight is just so great. It's in front of this pawn. It's not in any way attackable by a white piece even. And it looks at the a3 pawn in addition. This is a pawn up and a strategically winning position for black. So it is relatively speaking better to play bishop c2 using the fact that after queen d1 the f1 rook can recapture, so white is not losing the exchange. However, after bishop c2 we can conclude that after something like this, white is forced to trade. And once we reach this position in our calculation, we can basically discard everything else. Because here black is a pawn up, he has traded queens, which means he's not going to get checkmated on the king side, which is basically the only thing left for white. His situation with pawn down and rotten structure basically commits him to checkmate or die in the endgame, let's say. And here we are close to the endgame. It is almost an endgame. Queens are traded. And, well, pawn up, good structure, queens traded, many weaknesses. Look at this. It's all weak. It's all weak here. This is a fantastic situation for black. With d takes c5, with d takes c5, we force the queen trade, and we force, in many situations, the trade of light squared bishop, which also is very favorable for black. So this is a mysterious moment in this game. D takes c5 would have led to, this is a winning position for black, really. It hints maybe at the at a weakness in our viewer's play. It seemed that he did not make a thorough check of all the possible moves here. I understand that after what he played, if we look at what he played, he took with the b pawn, white captures, and knight b3. This is a tempting line. Well, it's a double attack. But the other position is just clearly better. And once you come to this situation with queen takes d6, once you come to this in your calculation, you will see that it's getting complicated now. After queen d6, bishop d6, there's e7 hanging. What about the knight on a1? Will it come out of white's camp? Here black is an exchange up for a pawn in some lines. Nice, but in the other line, queens traded, winning structure, got an extra pawn. This is just better. It's just better without any counterplay and without anything that is kind of vague and unclear. And here it's not easy. It's not so easy to play that. They got exactly this position. And now it was our viewer's choice to play. And he played knight takes c5. This is yet another somewhat mysterious move. If you are that far, you have to go for queen d6 and take the rook. After knight c5, queen c5, yeah, white is a pawn up. And to be honest, black has compensation, really, yeah? Black has compensation for that pawn. But it is simply not going for the maximum. If you think about this, queen d6, bishop d6, it's a forced line. Knight grabs the rook. White has to take on e7. Otherwise, I mean, this is kind of... Yeah, and knight c6 next. This is just an exchange for a pawn. So this, bishop e7, rook e8, bishop d6, and the knight comes back. So the knight is not trapped, and black is there with an exchange up. I mean, you have to do that. There's really no way around this. This is being material up, and white's compensation is not clear. In the other situation, we are a pawn down for some compensation. So this is clearly the more principled way to play. By the way, I think maybe rook takes a1 is indeed stronger. Now that I look at it, my notes don't mention that, but this is probably stronger in comparison to the other thing. Here, this, and then maybe c5 coming. I mean, white does continue here. He's not like lost. But this is what black has to do. You have to take the material and say, okay, show me. Yeah, this is the better approach than, well, sitting there with a pawn down and hoping for compensation like here. Black has some compensation, and this is due to the fact that white's, not great pawn structure with the split pawns here always gives black some play. We will see it in the game. It went back. Rook c1. And queen b6. This is what he played. And it's interesting to read the notes. He says, I'm obviously suffering, not just down material, but with a weak back rank and a knight that is not well placed. I have a couple of pawns to attack though, and I'm trying to do so. Yeah, well, black is not really suffering that much. I mean, he had much better alternatives along the way, but this is a position where, I don't know, I would be concerned, but I wouldn't be in panic mode here, because in many cases black will have ideas really against the pawns, and in a lot of situations you will get the pawn back, and when you get the pawn back, in fact, quite often black will even be better. So I wouldn't be so concerned here. I think he was a little bit too panicky here. Black, for example, a simple solution here for black would be something like knight to c6. Yeah, he mentioned that his knight on e7 is not well placed. So, well, go ahead, put it to c4. Why not? Knight c6 is a good way to start. For example, queen back, and then now knight a5, knight c4. This is a good square for the knight. So let's go there. White, of course, has his play. E5, knight c4, knight e4. This is a possible variation, but this is not at all clear. I mean, the c3 pawn is white's extra pawn, and to be honest, it doesn't look like it's going to promote anytime soon. And as long as that is not happening, it's not such a big deal. Note that also, well, a3 is not a strong point in white's camp either. So this is not clear. And by the way, this type of position is very well known in the Nimzo. With the extra pawn, white is not automatically winning due to his light squared weaknesses. So this is not so bad. I think one problem here was that our viewer was panicking a little bit and thinking, okay, well, I'm really bad shape. And this is not the case, really. This position is well, I wouldn't start to celebrate here, but it gives you very decent chances to to hold it with good defensive skills. Yeah, queen b6 is not really helping in that regard. King h1. Yeah, note that the queen trade is of course very helpful for black. So that was probably the idea, but white is not going to take. He played king h1, that's a good move. Rook d8, queen here. And knight went to g6. Yeah, again, knight c6 was an idea. Yeah, the knight g6 move it's not so obvious to me what the knight is doing on g6. Yeah, I mean, okay, you attack f4, true, but I think c4 looks like a very decent square for the knight, so we should aim for that. Yeah, maybe it wasn't so clear to the black player where he ultimately wanted the knight to have. If he really made up his mind that, okay, I want to go to c4, that's the square I want to go to, then knight c6 is kind of, suggesting itself. Knight g6 was played, e5, and queen e3, trying for counterplay there against f4. Yeah, okay, white went queen e4, queen d2, and now white pushed f5. This is the debatable move, really, f5. It's active, it's very active, but it is also a bit tricky in terms of pawn structure. The e5 pawn gets weak after that. If you play f5, you really need to have a very concrete idea of how to continue. After the capture, white, however, now took with the queen, and I think this is not really leading to that much. Knight f5, that was an idea to make f5, or to give f5 some more bite. The idea here can be to put the queen on g4 and possibly push the h-pawn up the board, just going for an attack. In any case, it was a very responsible decision to play f5, and e5 is just weak. Yeah, and what our viewer says, where is it? He mentioned white's rotten. Yeah, with three split pawns, there should be some fight in the position. That's true. That's really true. It's very important to note that white has very much split pawns. In the game with queen f5, knight f5 was much better. It is even debatable if white has an advantage. Queen d7, queen e4, doesn't want to trade, and queen d5. That's totally fine. Note how weak the e5 pawn is. Rook e1 was played. Rook c8, also good, using this rook. And white now played h3. Okay, probably he was worried about his back rank. Queens were traded. And now the move rook e8. Yeah, notice, one weakness, two weaknesses, three weaknesses. And black only has the a7 pawn as a potential target for white's pieces. The knight on g also is not very well placed. In this position, black is totally fine. That was the result of this f5 push connected with queen takes f5. Black here is fine. So how did it continue? After rook e8, white went knight to f5, yeah, wanting to activate the knight. Pawn was taken. Why not? The important trick is that after the move knight d6, which was not played, black has knight d3. And he's okay due to that counter attack against the rook. By the way, black also had this move, just waiting a moment and threatening rook c5. Rook e5, I'm sorry. That was also very much okay for him. But it's a good move. Knight e5 is no problem at all. Rook e1 was played. And this is now in a very important and decisive moment of the game. After rook e1, the knight on e5 is quite obviously pinned. Yeah, we cannot move the knight as e8 is falling. So black really wants to play the move f6 making sure that the knight is safely protected, is attacked in the first place. However, after f6, there is knight d6, this big fork. So, if you start to calculate here, you have to determine the candidate moves. And there are really only two. f6, covering e5. I mean, you don't want to give up the knight. Or rook c5, keeping the knight protected. After f6, there's knight d6. After rook c5, there is no fork. So you have to play rook c5. Just keep the knight. However, he went f6. Yeah, and then knight d6 just hit. So this can only be a case of, I don't know, sloppy calculation or blundering. In this particular case, it is a totally concrete position, just decided by move calculation. e5 is hanging, you have to keep the knight. There are only two moves. One just secure the knight and keeps black in the game. The other drops in exchange, and you simply have to play rook c5. That's it. And in fact, white now can force a draw. Yeah, he can basically force a draw with attacking. I think knight b7 maybe even. Yeah, rook e7 is also possible with this kind of perpetual thing. But well, here, if anybody does have something, it's black. Because if you get to play f6 and rook e to c7, I like here, yeah, keeping the knight, switching over, taking c3, then black is clearly in command. But okay, white has various ways with his active pieces to force some kind of repetition, or I mean, he's active enough to draw. But this has to be played. After f6, there's just knight d6, and that's it. It's just the exchange. And black really has no particular chance here to hold it. His knight is at the moment quite strong on e5, but ultimately it is really just a complete exchange, and white's rooks are active. And white does play it fine. Yeah, he pushes the c-pawn, yeah, he kind of offer this pawn, but the issue is that here ultimately the a pawn will get lost. So this is not not helpful for black at all. It eases white's task. King f7 was played, rook c1. Yeah, c5 again. Yeah, he offered the pawn for sake of trading. This would be a fairly simple endgame win with white coming to c7. So good technical play here by white. Yeah, rook will enter. And now f6 is falling. So after that, black is basically lost. Yeah, check. I don't want to go into this much further. Black was fighting on, but it was a loss. Yeah, white returned the exchange for being 2 pawns up, but this is a winning endgame, so it's not not really leading too much to look at it in much detail. I rather want to look at the second game a little bit. So what is the essence of this game? Let's go back and look at a couple of key points. Black played this slightly unconventional Nimzo-Indian type of opening, but it seems that, at least if you look at the annotation, that he wasn't aware how good his setup is actually. Yeah, that this knight e7 is in fact one of the ideas of his setup. So he played it without really being aware of some benefits of his particular move order. A key moment is here, where bishop a6 was stronger than queen d7, but even with that, it was a very strong position, as white did not really even try to get any kind of counterplay. After this and the capture on c5, here we have the moment, I think, of the game, as d takes c5 is basically winning. Black has a huge advantage after that, and he will get queens traded and will play a far more, let's say, yeah, this position is far easier to play in comparison to anything else, simply because there is little tactics. It's very stable and tidied up, let's say. Yeah, after this move. And after that, here it gets yeah, it gets very messy. By the way, it's important to mention, I forgot that actually. The bishop takes c5 move is of course a mistake. That gives black the advantage with knight b3. Rook a d1 was much better. Attacking this first and keeping this bishop c5 option open, so that after this, then we can take, which is much better because this is no fork anymore. So this is what white should have done actually. I'm sorry about that. I should have mentioned that in the original commentary. Yeah, this is a mistake due to knight b3, and now black had to grab the exchange and not play this position a pawn down. It wasn't terrible, the position a pawn down, but well, you can take the exchange. You should do that. Yeah, and let the other guy show what his compensation is. It wasn't a full compensation really. Okay, let's have a look at the second game. Just a moment. Yeah, second game is loaded, and again it's from black's point of view. Our viewer has the black pieces. Yeah, the same person as in game 1. And he's playing much higher rated opponent. 1940 is the other guy's rating. So we got 1b3 played. Yeah, rare move, but has gained some popularity recently. Our viewer played e6, which is not bad, but to be honest, I really think that if white is not taking the center, we should. So e5, d5, one of the moves. e5 is the best move. It's really the best move, I think, in comparison. And just grab as much of the center as you can. Not that e6 is a mistake, but why limit yourself to small moves if you can play e5? So I would really advise to do that. Even if you're not a 1e4 player, it makes perfect sense to play e5. Or if not, just go d5 and keep this option open to get your bishop out. Okay, well, it's not a mistake. It's just it feels like black is limiting itself a little bit. f4. Yeah, white is going for this Dutch type of setup. Bishop e7, knight f3, castles, e3, and b6. Yeah, that's okay. If you play it like that, fianchettoing on the queen side, this makes lots of sense. So bishop e2. Yeah, I think the next move is not annotated by our viewer here, but I think it's a mistaken idea. He went bishop a6, looking for a trade there of the bishop. I think this is actually a mistake, and the reason is that this is a welcome trade for white. One thing to ask here is, if you play bishop b7, let's say castled, and you play something like c5, put a pawn there. Let us have a look here. What is white's plan in this position? It's not so easy to say actually. One reason is that if we are not going to play d5 as black, the move knight e5 doesn't make much sense, as d6 is kicking the knight back. White really has some problems here with giving its play some kind of bite. For example, if you try to gain space with d3 here, you really weaken your square and pawn there on e3 quite a bit. And let's say after this, black is just like on e4 a ton of times, really a ton of times, and e4 is difficult to play. If you compare that to the game, note also that the bishop is not a particularly great piece. In the game after, let's say, bishop a6, white castled, he took. Note that it also takes time. White got the queen to e2, and he's glad about that trade, because now d3, e4 looks relatively simple to accomplish. Quite often, white wants to trade this e2 bishop and uses tempi for that in the opening, like bishop b5 check if the d-pawn moves early and taking on d7. Here black has invested 2 moves to get a trade in. that is not necessarily helping him, as the bishop on b7 would have been a much stronger piece, yeah, look at this long diagonal, than the bishop on e2. So you trade a piece which is essentially better than the other guy's piece, and yeah, this is not a good deal. Queen e2. Yeah, now black went d5. This move is certainly aimed at controlling the e4 square, but something that you have to be aware of. If you go d5 in this position, and it was not necessary yet, yeah, black had alternatives to play without the move, like c5 for example, it was perfectly playable. If you go d5 in this position, you really have to think about one thing, the long diagonal. Yeah, this is a long diagonal, and d5 is weakening this diagonal a little bit. Yeah, for example, the square e5 is much more of an outpost now. If you play d5, you really should keep in mind that, okay, I have to fight on this long diagonal. I cannot just give him this diagonal as a starting point for active operations against my king. This is very important. The long diagonal here is aiming towards black's king. And after d3, the next move is interesting. He played rook to e8. Kind of a mysterious move. I first thought that it could have been the start of a decent plan, but it is not followed up upon. It's just that the move seems disconnected with the next. It doesn't connect with the next couple of moves. I actually thought black's idea might have been, okay, white played knight bd2. We can put that on the board. That's expected. I thought black played rook e8 to maybe play this, bishop f8, g6, bishop g7. This is a slow plan, and I'm not sure I would recommend it, but it kind of fits with rook e8 in some way. He didn't do that. He played the move c6, and this is a move that clearly shows that black is not, at this particular moment, is not aware of the dangers. He absolutely should think about what is the setup that makes me fight for this diagonal, for these squares. And the first move of that can only be c5. You have to go c5 and knight c6. This is the best square for the knight. It does support a couple of things. For example, it supports d5 to d4, trying to make this bishop look stupid. Just to show the idea. Okay, white's moves are not great, but let's just show the idea. Like this, let's say, and something like here. You have this idea. Go d4 and try to blunt this bishop. Try to make it look a little bit stupid on b2. This is one idea. And also, if you put this knight on c6, you have knight f to d7 and possibly bishop f6. Fighting for this diagonal, maybe trying to trade off the dark squared bishop. This is absolutely, I mean, note that it doesn't really connect to rook e8, but still, you have to do something active now. He went c6, however, and now knight e5 is coming. And again, you have to fight this now, and he doesn't. He plays queen c7, knight bd7. What about this move? Yeah, this is also an idea. Trying to trade here quickly, or get an f6. Yeah, let's say, like here, you can think of this move. Yeah, okay, white has knight g4, and it might be dangerous, but at least the diagonal is blunted, and knight e5 is not coming so quickly again. So you have to fight against the opponent's main idea. If you let him do his things and don't get any counterplay, this is rarely a good idea. And we see that black is losing tons of time here. Queen c7, knight bd7, rook d1. It's kind of mysterious. Rook d1. Don't quite sure what this does, but rook d8 is also not played with a particular plan. King h1, and now rook f8. This is actually a good move. Yeah, the idea is to maybe play knight to e8 and then f6. A really good move for defensive purposes. If you go bishop d6, white has queen g3. So this does not help. Black is not in a position to really win the fight for that square anymore. Okay, rook f8 and queen h3 was played. Yeah, so again, black has to get counterplay. He has to make up his mind. How is he getting rid of the knight? How is he fighting against this pressure on the long diagonal? And he simply doesn't. Plays bishop d6 now. If you play this, for example, you're in much better shape. The idea is to take on e5 and possibly play f6 at the right moment. It also protects g7. For example, just a sample line. If white goes here, you go c5. And now, how does white continue? It's not that easy, actually. Yeah, if white trades, we are basically happy. That helps us. Knight g5 takes, and e5 is hanging. So white would have to do some trades. And, well, here we are in decent enough shape. So knight e8 and c5. What else? White can try to play like this. Yeah, use the pawn to attack, but then black gets this f6 idea. Yeah, and something like g4, f6, knight takes, queen takes, and then possibly knight d6 is kind of okay for black. I'd rather be white, but it's playable. You can fight this, and you're not getting checkmated on g7 so quickly. Bishop d6, however, was played. Knight d to f3. And now bishop c5. This is not helping at all, but by now black is, I think, maybe too much problems. If you go knight e8 now, for example, if you try to pick up on that idea, knight g5 is going to be very strong. Yeah, just mating here. And if black is playing h6, white is going to smash on f7. It's really a huge problem. Rook takes, knight takes here is very strong. Or alternatively this. And this is also very strong, threatening. Knight takes, queen takes, and mate. Yeah, and that's it basically. Black is getting killed here. Yeah, white's attack is by now too strong. He's got everything on the king, and I don't think you can still get a good playable position here. Bishop c5 was played, rook d e1. That isn't even the best move. Knight d7 was a bit stronger. But okay, knight d7, queen g4, this kind of idea was even stronger. Okay, bishop b4. Yeah, black is not really helping here with his moves. And b5, knight g5. Yeah, we see that the attack gets very, very strong. h6 was played, and here the white player, just commits a mistake. It's a bit strange though. Here white could have won the game immediately by taking on f7, and I'm not quite sure what he missed there, because it's a fairly straightforward affair. Knight f7, rook takes, knight takes, king takes. That's totally forced, and now the next move g4 is also, yeah, not really rocket science. You try to play g5 and pry the whole thing open. Black really is just getting killed here. Yeah, like here, g5, back, e4, and f5 coming, and well, this is a disaster. And white is not even material down. Yeah, he didn't need to sacrifice anything here. That's important. Yeah, instead he went back, and this is giving black a little bit of relief. I mean, okay, h6 has weakened for g4, g5, but the other thing was winning immediately. Still, it's not fun. Yeah, black played c5 now. I don't know. Yeah, you have other moves. Maybe you should take here on e5 and continue from there. After bishop takes and g4, however, it is very dangerous. Yeah. Bishop e7 maybe. Yeah, those kind of moves, they put up more resistance, but black's position is not something to enjoy. c5, g4 is strong. Knight h7 and rook g2. Yeah, rook g2 it's keeping in a big advantage, but g5 already was leading to a devastating attack, and yeah, probably to a quick win. A very, very cute line to look at is, for example, this takes, takes, bishop takes, queen somewhere, rook g2, and at the end this is quite neat. Yeah, queen g7 mate, and this is also not ending particularly well. Okay, rook g2 was played. It's the slower way to do it, but still very strong. f6 and knight g6. Yeah, instead of knight g6, white had a more powerful move g5, but he didn't play that. This would have been a bit more forceful, even, for example, like this.
Check.
And this. And black is getting wiped out very, very quickly. Yeah, something like this is already threatening mate. He went here, however, which is not spoiling anything. It's just not so forceful. G5 is a good move. H takes g5, and now yeah, now something curious happens. White plays the move queen takes e6, and this all of a sudden gives black some chances to consolidate. After f takes g5, white is simply winning the game, and even quickly. It's not going to last very long. There are some very cute lines. If black, for example, takes this here, white has a really cool sequence.
Check.
Whoop, queen sack.
Check.
Check. Isn't this a nice position? Threatening rook g7 mate. Yeah, black is totally lost here. Let's say e5. Check. Here for rook h3 mate. Yeah, and the best that black can do is something like this.
Check. Check. Checkmate.
And mate. Very nice. Yeah, this would have won very quickly, f takes g5, but white took on e6. And this all of a sudden gives black some hope again. This is right, of course, yeah? Trading the g6 knight and all with tempo. Back. Takes. We still, of course, can see that white has an attack. Knight h4, knight f5, and so on. But it's not like mate. It's not mate immediately. However, it's probably still not possible to defend. Probably not. Okay, d4 was played, blocking the long diagonal. And now rook f g1. Yeah, rook g1. Knight h4 was stronger, yeah? Getting to f5 quicker. Probably this wins quite convincingly. Rook g1, however, is not as good, because now instead of queen c8, there was rook d5, and this was a potential try at a defense. I mean, yeah, it's still going to be very dangerous, but it was a better try. The idea is that after knight h4, queen d7, f5, rook e7, black is continuing to hold, and maybe can initiate some trades like that. This was played in the game. f5, and now rook e7. Rook e7 is a mistake which was not exploited. However, it's difficult to give black any advice. White's attack is so strong. After rook e7, white had a funny and quick win with queen g7.
Check.
However, he did not play that. Yeah.
Check.
This.
Check. Check. Check.
Yeah. Can
Check.
drop one.
Check. Checkmate.
And mate, yeah, it's made in like 8 moves, but it's relatively straightforward. So certainly certainly doable. Yeah, this kind of calculation. White didn't do that. However, he played bishop. Sorry, he played queen h5. I'm sorry. After here he played bishop c1. Yeah, the move rook d5 was a much better defense again. Trying to defend here by counter-attacking f5. After here, rook de5. White does not have knight g6 because after this, there is a hanging pawn. So there were a couple of defensive alternatives, but by now black certainly also was in time trouble. Both games were, by the way, played with where is it? 30 minute per game, and a smallish increment. So it was probably a matter of time as well. Yeah, in the game here, the attack becomes unstoppable. Bishop h6. Yeah, and white is breaking through on g7. It continued a couple of moves, but white was now picking up pieces, let's say. And well, he overstepped the time now. He actually resigned. No, I'm sorry. Played rook e2, seeing that knight g5 was coming, and then resigned. Yeah, so this is a loss mostly due to the lack of, or let's say, simply not trying to fight against the main idea here, which is using the diagonal, using the e5 square. If black starts early to combat that idea, it won't be that dangerous. Yeah, important is that this is all connected to the d5 move. If you don't play d5, you don't really give him the e5 square. Black, for example, could have played, I mean, just for argument's sake, you could have played something like that if you want to avoid something coming to there. Yeah, just play in a Sicilian style and maybe go knight d7 and bishop f6 in the next couple of moves. Important is always trying to be aware what the opponent's main idea is. If you fight the main ideas, very often the worst, and the worst is over, it's the wrong expression, but nothing very serious is going to happen to you. Yeah? If the main ideas are not working, he has to resort to some other ideas, which are probably not that dangerous. So here, fighting on the long diagonal, trying to oppose that b2 bishop and trying to get rid of the piece on e5 would have been a good recipe. Quite often this knight e8 move was a key idea to defend. Okay, that was a long video, but it had two interesting games to look at. I hope you enjoyed that. Thanks for watching.